fill out the hour I got. If I'm talking too fast in between the presentation, just shoot. One thing I actually wanted to do is, before I start sharing the presentation slides with you, because there might be some URLs and you might just click on them while I'm speaking. With that, today I'm want to talk a little bit about giving a short introduction, share my story, how I went to first time all remote, and the things I've learned with collaboration, with with some insights into my current work days, how I'm doing things. Then how GitLab is using GitLab, because it's a really fascinating, interesting story. And a little bit about how we use GitLab and other tools to automate everything, because manual work is a bug sometimes. And we also want to inspire you for new adventures. I'm planning to talk around about 45 minutes, and afterwards we can have a Q&A session. If you do have any questions in between, I would say put them in the chat, and we just talk afterwards about the specific things. With that, yeah, I'm Michael. Typically, my last name doesn't really work in English, so I just said I'm Michael. I'm a developer evangelist at GitLab, which means I'm trying to share the latest tech, try to engage with our community, make your life easier, create trainings, presentations, education material, whatever comes to mind. I'm primarily focused on the ops side of the DevOps lifecycle, which means monitoring, observability, tracing, and other parts. Everything else, my handle is DNS Michi on social media, as well as on GitHub, on GitLab, and yeah, basically everywhere. So this is me. I started, so in 1983, there was a Git in it. And then I was like, oh, there's a computer. I have no idea what a computer is. I was super much enjoyed the turbo boost button on the old computers from 33 to 66 megahertz. And this was kind of the inspiration to study hardware software systems engineering on the University of Applied Sciences in Hagenberg in Upper Austria. And after a while I figured, well, the hardware is not really my story. I might just look more into software. And I went to Vienna for NFC development in early 2005 at the Mobilcom Austria back then. Went a little up above and beyond into multimedia streaming with Linux, came into DNS development at the University of Vienna, and somehow touched monitoring. And monitoring was my first open source project back then. And I kind of traveled the world because I moved to Nuremberg 8 years ago. Joined open source communities, became a GitLab trainer actually. And this opened my doors to joining GitLab somehow. And I was just sitting there last year and asking myself, maybe I should just do it, because life is an adventure, and if I would regret it at some time. But I also knew, okay, it would be all remote. This is totally different to what I've been used to before. So I want to dive a little bit how my first impressions were and how everything worked out. We do have some resources in our handbook on questions for companies or people who are suddenly remote right now. So this wasn't really planned, or maybe just going ahead. So I've just linked the top questions from our handbook, because Darren shared that, I think, 2 hours ago, in the past, or was it yesterday, in a different time zone actually. So I wanted to share it with you as well. But the most interesting part is probably how a workspace could look like. And I was planning quite a while, or actually I was planning to have everything in March, but then the pandemic started and I couldn't buy a webcam, I couldn't buy a standing desk. Basically, I was working on my MacBook. And after a while, I had the chance to actually create my workspace. And I was eager getting a standing and a sitting desk because I'm 2 meters tall, and it's still complicated. So flying on an aeroplane is, it's not fun. I'm also short-sighted, which means I needed a monitor which is good for my eyes, not to get tired. And so I was trying some things and reviewing monitors and hardware. I also have a noise canceling headphone, which I'm using right now. So any neighbor who might ring the bell right now is, I don't hear it, and you won't hear it either. And one thing I'm also like capable of, I'm living a little bit outside of Nuremberg in the countryside. So normally I'm looking into the green, which also helps me refresh my mind or relax my mind a little. If you want to kind of learn more how the setup is built and what other tips and tricks and evaluation I did, I've blogged about my journey in the first month. You can just either click the URLs now or do that later asynchronously. The other part, which was kind of different, was onboarding in a new company. It's not like you're entering an office and you start with saying hello and meeting your team members and then maybe getting a list of tools, what you need to do. I basically got a new GitLab issue assigned. So I got access to my GitLab account and my Gmail account before. And then it was all the way through going to secure my account because two-factor authorization is required for our accounts. We have a strong security policy. My MacBook needs to be encrypted, and everything is basically with Markdown, tasks list, and checkboxes in GitLab itself. So it's a long list of, I think it was 200 tasks I had to complete. And there was also a note in the issue: don't be overwhelmed. You might have tasks for 1 week, but still, if you cannot do it, onboarding takes a month. Onboarding might take 3 months. And to be honest, there might be some things which I haven't done yet because it can get overwhelming, and oftentimes you learn more when you just try things out or you ask someone. Yeah, it went really, really well. And I was not working 70 hours a week. It was just like the 40 hours, but I also needed to find a daily routine and other things. One thing which we also do is we have everything as issue templates. So there is a general template, and then for specific roles, so for example, for marketing, which is my role. Yeah, and for keeping the data safe, we keep these issues confidential. Another one is, or another thing I needed to change a little or adopt was to document everything. So whenever we have a discussion or we have a meeting or a coffee chat or something else, we write it down. So we have Google Docs, and these might be draft documents or meeting agendas. It's just a way of keeping information in the cloud, keeping it available, because when I write something down 2 hours later, or maybe 10 hours later in a different time zone, someone else can say, oh, we talked about this, Michael is sleeping currently, and we have it available. It's not somewhere in your directory tree on your notebook. It's available for everyone at GitLab. The other thing we do is when a meeting happens, it has an agenda. Otherwise, it's no meeting. And we do keep live notes, which means there is no direct person assigned to writing the protocol. This happens naturally in the meeting. Someone takes the role, and it's just being done. And it's also possible to define to-dos from the Google Notes, and then later on create action items from that. And a similar thing happens with presentations. So right now you're seeing a Google slide presentation, which is what we use for anything where we want to create a presentation from. Yeah, the other thing is What I needed to learn is Slack. So I've been using some chat tools before, and I knew about Slack. And I thought, well, I would be just joining in there and then maybe search for past events or past discussions. Yeah, but it's actually, we use it differently at GitLab because we retire the messages after 90 days and you have no way to like look it up afterwards because it's just deleted. So Slack is not the knowledge base and it's not the single source of truth, which is our handbook. So anything which has an impact or needs to be documented or defines a process or maybe even is a change to a process needs to be added to the handbook, which makes this, I think there are 7,000 pages right now if you would print it. I haven't read it all, to be honest, but the handbook, for example, being public really helped to prepare for my role because I could look up everything in advance, everything I wanted to learn. I think everyone told me not to read too much, but it's an open book. You can just read it. So yeah, everything is in there. And one thing or one workflow we also had, and this is my developer past, you need to create an issue, and once you're confident with it, you start working on it, and then you create a merge request. Whenever we do see some changes or some typos, or even we want to, for example, update the handbook because there is a new social media strategy or something else, we can just start with a merge request because editing the file and creating a merge request is far more easy than to create an issue and then go the whole story. So one way of doing things is just starting with a merge request. The other thing, which I already mentioned, is the meetings. One thing we do is preparing for a meeting happens asynchronously. So we know when a meeting is going on. And if it's a group conversation, there might be slides. The slides are only reviewed. Normally there's no live presentation because when you do presentations over Zoom, which is right now as well, it can get quite exhausting because you are just listening or just watching the presentation, and after a while you might get distracted or might be doing something else. And we use slides in a way to just review them, and we discuss the changes or the things we see in there, and also have the notes in the agenda back then. With that, on the right-hand side, I've actually taken a screenshot. There is no confidential stuff in it, so you can also freely share that if you want to. We use kind of Google Docs for the agenda. And one of the reasons why we use Google Docs right now is because of the live editing. So when there are 100 people editing a Google document, it might get stressful a little for the Google servers, but still it's live editing. We do want to add that to GitLab as well, but the technology is not yet there. But we do have some ideas and feature requests for this. But right now we're using Google Docs for that. Yeah, a little bit more about the direct collaboration and things we do together. I needed one thing which fascinated me, that everyone can see what I'm doing. So any issue update, any merge request, anything which happens in the public is there, and you can respond to me. So when you're following my activities on GitLab.com, for example, and you see some interesting stuff or some interesting feature requests going on, you could just jump in there and comment and say, hey, Michael, maybe we can implement this that way so that our development workflow gets any better in regard, for example, with the Jira integration to GitLab. The other thing is our meetings and discussions are getting recorded, and we try to record it every time, just because everyone who is not in our time zone or not able to attend the meeting can watch the recording later on. And there is no pressure to attend any meetings. You could also, for example, say, I have a busy week. I need to prepare for presentations, or I might just implement a new feature. And I watch the recording later on, maybe with double speed, just to get a glimpse on what's important, what's needed, and I don't need to attend the meeting. Also, normally I'm trying to look into the camera, which is a total strange feeling sometimes. It's totally okay to do something else, or to like work on the side. And when someone says your name, say, hey, sorry, I didn't listen. Can you repeat the question? And then you can join the conversation as well. And if you want to like look from the outside, everything is uploaded to our YouTube channels. So before joining GitLab, I was watching group conversations, and I got an idea how things work, or maybe how features are getting implemented. And oftentimes there are also live streams, which means the group conversation is live streamed to YouTube, and you can watch it. This also happens for release planning. So if, for example, the next release will be 13.5, so the release kickoff videos are already online, and everyone can look into it, what's coming and what's cooking. A little bit about Slack, and this is a slide, or this is an image I found in a recent blog post or article. Because Slack is a time sink, or Slack can be a time sink, some ways to engage and to say, hey, when I'm highlighted in Slack, it's totally fine to ignore it for a while, or maybe even just go ahead and say, I'm working in an asynchronous fashion. There is no immediate response. And I shouldn't write anything in Slack and say, hey, I need a response now, because the other person might just be out for a walk, or might just be sleeping, or something else. So we shouldn't put any pressure on that. The other way is getting attention should be focused on a single person, or maybe a group of people. But using the ad mention for a channel with 600 or maybe even 1,300 people, this can get quite annoying, and we try to avoid that at all costs. The other thing is, we do use private messages, but we are also trying to avoid it, because a private message cannot be shared with new conversation members later on. Sorry. Or there might be just, you want to add a new member to the conversation, share it, link it. You cannot do that with a private message. And we are trying to create just a public channel with the small group for that instead. But I would say, generally speaking, because they're listed on as the 5th point, switching to email, I think I'm not using email that much. Oftentimes we are discussing in Slack, and when there is an action which needs to be documented because Slack gets retired, we just move ahead with creating an issue or directly proposing an MR. And I will come to the bots a little later on, but it's all listed in there. We do have a bot which reminds us of using an inclusive language. Because, hey guys, it's not really inclusive, and there are often ways we want to enhance that and get better. Some other tips for remote communication, because this is something I would say I needed to learn and adopt it, because some things are just not the same as when you're sitting in an office, or maybe just going over to your colleague and saying, hey, I want to talk about this. Do you have time? Focus on or embrace asynchronous communication, which means you don't really expect an immediate answer. You either communicate in Slack or even in GitLab issues. And you have a golden rule, which means if you're going too much back and forth that often, so playing ping pong with, I want to do this, what do you think, and things like that, we do have the the rule when it's three times, we just schedule a coffee chat or a sync call and say, hey, let's just talk about it. The same goes, for example, for production incidents when GitLab.com, for example, is affected and different teams need to cross-collaborate on resolving the issue. We oftentimes just start a Zoom session and discuss what's next, what's coming, do some screen sharing and so on. If we communicate asynchronously, we look for low context conversations, which means providing as much detail as possible. So it shouldn't be like the 10 pages brain dump thing, but it should, someone who joins the conversation later on should be able to understand what's going on. Maybe even providing a TLDR, so too long didn't read summary at some point. Yeah, and maybe someone is getting on vacation and someone else needs to take over. So there shouldn't be the need to explain everything from the beginning again. And the last one, which is mentioned here, again, document everything, have the meeting agenda, actions, records, things, have everything in the handbook. And last but not least, also document all the tools and tips, because there are many tools which can make your life easier. This is not just Zoom or Slack or Gmail. There are other things for a MacBook, for a Linux laptop, and so on. Even some shortcuts I didn't know before are documented and really make my life easier every day. Okay. Then in terms of communication, we have defined our culture and our values, and there are like many of them. I want to highlight two of them which really helped me, because previously I was kind of working in my own ecosystem, and it was my open source backend development area. And right now, with changing to GitLab, I kind of feared what would be the case when I'm changing from my developer evangelist role, maybe a little bit into engineering and discuss with our product managers, other things, or maybe even taking the lead of a new project, which means a cross collaboration. We don't have any short toes, which means you can approach someone in a respectful way. We can work together, and it's no problem if someone wants to give a talk, for example, which would be my profession at GitLab, or just like saying, hey, you're actually doing my job currently. This is not a problem. Another thing is, and this helps me every day becoming a better person, is to always assume positive intent, because oftentimes you're writing something and you don't really know the other person. You don't see it. You don't see them. You cannot. It's also hard over Zoom to see the facial impressions and have some like sarcasm inside or something else. So when someone is doing something and you kind of disagree on it and say, yeah, but it's not meant in a negative way. Try to see it in a positive way and try to engage in the conversation, and also look for that when for example, communicating with the wider community, because yeah, GitLab is so slow, or GitLab is not good, or some other not so nice words. Bad feedback also is good feedback, because you can improve and you can make it better to avoid any negative sentiments in the future as well. Okay. Another tip for remote collaboration, and this is something I wasn't sure about, to be honest, when joining. When you're working in different time zones, you also have different daytime formats. And there is the one with the American format, and then Europe has one. And basically parsing it, reading it, automating it becomes not so nice. And at GitLab, we agreed on using the ISO datetime. Sometimes it's hard to follow it, but we also advocate each other when we see, okay, it's using a different time format, reminding ourselves of we need to use the ISO datetime just to make it easier for everyone to contribute and to add to the conversation. Same goes for scheduling a meeting within a time zone, or just posting a time when a meeting happens. This is always PT. So for me, or for our current time zone in CEST, it would be -9 hours. After a while, it's kind of natural. You adopt it and say, hey, right now we have, is it round about 4 p.m.? So in PT, it's 7 a.m. People are just getting up. And we also do have helpers inside Gmail, for example, and everything around it. So this really helps to focus on the details in the conversation and not just, this might be -5 hours and this might be -9 hours, and everything else gets complicated if you don't have a single source of truth for the date and times. This was lots of technical and collaboration things. One thing which really was nice also in the first week, you want to engage with your future colleagues, you want to work, but you also want to get to know each other. And at some point, you also want to build a friendship or build relationships. And that was the plan, to meet everyone in Prague at, I think it was end of March for GitLab Contribute. So all GitLab team members in one place. But it didn't work out in terms of the pandemic. But still, it's just every year we try to meet each other in one place. This didn't happen yet. On the flip side, we do have coffee chats, and the coffee chat is just a meeting without any agenda. You talk about social life, about family, about technology, about whatever you want. And you are not obligated to record it. You don't need to like prove that you did something valuable for the company in that regard. It's just having 30 minutes, or like in a speedy meeting, having 25 minutes, just a good time together. And one way I've been also using it for engaging with the wider community, creating some product feedback, ask me anything, or even technology exchange. So I've kind of created a German, everyone can contribute, Käffchen, which is like the German version of the coffee chat. And it's super nice to engage with our community and share some technology and educate each other on the latest tech. Because oftentimes it's really hard to keep up and say what's coming, what's next, what is Kubernetes, what is Vault, what is CI/CD, what's going on. Yeah, and on one other thing is many of us are actually active on social media, and lately I've seen that Marcel has been sharing some insights into his work as a designer and manager, and also as a product designer. And he got asked like how everything works in a way of keeping things efficient, looking at results, working in a comprehensive and short way. And this is just some good insights which have been shared. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Just wanted to share that with you now. But I think I'm running a little out of time. In terms of insights into my workday, and this will be rather short, I think. I've just tried to collect what I'm doing. I'm kind of checking my calendar. looking what's basically coming up. I have my focus time scheduled. So for today's presentation, I blocked some more focus time, being able to just create the slides. I'm checking my emails. I'm not checking them often, so it's in the morning, at lunch, at maybe end of the day, just because it's asynchronous communication and no one expects any fast responses in that regard. And I have many open tabs, which can be seen in the screenshot. I'm just keeping things which I read in an email or like in an issue notification and just work on it later on when I get the time. This also brings me to my to-dos. So when someone mentions me on GitLab or a specific action is taken, this is visible in the to-do list. This is something I check in on daily in a similar fashion as Todoist. As an external application to keep some bookmarks, some ideas which I want to research. So everything which is in my many open tabs for some reason might land in the research label in Todoist, for example, just to keep my tabs a little shorter. Slack is basically checking in the morning and during the day for ad notifications and any threads I might need to answer. The channels are organized in sections. This was a recent update in Slack, which really helps it. And everything else is basically, I'm trying to hide it behind one of my Chrome windows on my huge screen, just because it's time sync. And every time I'm trying to keep up with all the messages on Slack, I'm losing too much time, to be honest. And this is why I'm trying to keep it organized and focused on specific times. I do check on Slack and not that often. I also check social media because that's part of my job, building out my social profile and engaging with our community. I'm checking the notifications, but then I also stop because this has got the same problem. As you can see in the screenshot, you have so many columns to read, to focus on, and it's really impossible to say, hey, I'm checking 15 minutes of Twitter, and then you're watching the clock and say, oh, it's 2 hours later on. So I'm trying to just keep focusing on it. And the other workflow during the day is I'm exclusively working on GitLab.com on issues and MRs. I do prefer the web IDE, which is embedded into GitLab over any CLI access I might need. So I can do anything, any changes for documents or for the website, or even smaller bug fixes, demos, directly in the browser, and I don't need to switch the context. Other than that, I'm using Google Slides, Docs, social media, and yeah, and sometimes when I want to focus, I'm also listening to music, some EDM or trance stuff, which helps me focus even more. Yeah, that's about this. The most interesting part is probably how we are using GitLab, or so like GitLab is using GitLab, some kind of inception. The idea is that everyone uses GitLab just to dogfood everything. So we all can improve GitLab, and every team or department uses GitLab differently. So our engineering teams or development teams might have a different approach or different use case than, for example, marketing, who need to create marketing campaigns, organize events, do corporate marketing, external communications, PR, and anything around it. The second thing which is important is we try to keep the merge request throughput as good as possible. So we're trying to work in short iterations or with the minimal viable change. You might see that in our ecosystem as an MVC. And we're not trying to ship the perfect feature, which might take 6 months to complete, but just in smaller batches and smaller changes. And the idea is that everyone can contribute, so everything is public and keeping everything in the handbook as mentioned before. These are some insights from our engineering and product management. We do have a timeline for releases, and this worked since many years now. So there's the plan to release GitLab on the 22nd of each month. This has been done for 107 months now, and you can like set the time to see that the release kickoff for the next release happens on the 18th, and then afterwards on the 22nd there is a new release coming out. In terms of how the issues and the life cycles are being done, just a quick overview. We kind of start with a proposal, with an idea, and then continue to go on. I think, so I've heard that you are using Jira for issue management, so this might not be that interesting for you right now. But the idea also is you should be able to integrate GitLab with other ticket systems, especially Jira for that example. And it should be possible to not only kind of sync the issues, but also interact with them in a way that a merge request or something which triggers a CI test of some feedback loop also updates a Jira issue. And there is a deep integration between GitLab and Jira, and this gets improved over release. I think in the current release, there's also something inside. If we do need to provide security fixes, we have a private instance of GitLab which does not expose anything, and this gets backported into the release process later on, so that everyone stays safe. Yeah, we are heavily focused on issues and labels and milestones and epics. And our developers are also estimating the issues, and then basically the work gets started and the developers are going to work. We also have community contributions, which means everyone can contribute to anything which gets proposed. There is an accepting merge request label specifically for these kind of features and issues. And our engineers and our teams are trying to help with reviews, help with onboarding in terms of making it easier to improve GitLab on its own. When we look at the lifecycle of a merge request, after an issue gets assigned, our developers kind of work on the merge request using a template, which also includes having checklists and things to do. We're heavily relying on GitLab CI on every commit, which involves testing, security scanning, review apps, performance checks, lots of things going on. Everything is public, so if you need an inspiration for your own work or for your own integrations later on, this can be a valuable resource, or should be a valuable resource to look into that. And the review process is also truly important, because before merging anything into the master, which gets later on deployed into production, needs a review, and there are different approval rules for that, and many things more, making the process easier. Oftentimes there are lots of things going on between I think it's 14 stages right now, and there are many open issues, around about 33,000, I think, in summary, just for the main product. We use bots to help, which help us stay organized, and this helps us in a way of doing automated review, updating the labels, having triage reports, which means there are 10 open issues which haven't been triaged yet. Here is a summary, and people get assigned for it. And there's even more possibilities, making this a little bit more automated. In terms of some more insights, there are different organizations for our engineering and software development, but also for the company organization. We're using GitLab itself or the CI/CD pipelines to deploy our website. And this also helps to improve the product in a way that, for example, someone from marketing who doesn't have a deep technical background needs to understand when a pipeline is failing for deployment. And we also need to improve the product in ways to make it easier to use and understand. And we're also testing in production because GitLab.com is a rolling release, and the main branch gets deployed to production every day. We do have staging environments, but sometimes you trigger a bug in production, and we coordinate each other in resolving that. Yeah, this was the latest release, and every single month still happens. Last but not least, automate everything, and this should be probably interesting for everyone integrating with GitLab and working with GitLab in the future. There are some ways to engage Slack at GitLab and with GitLab. We use Slack specifically with bots for taking PTO, paid time off. We're also having people ops announcing new hires, but we're also integrating it with incident management, meaning to say our on-call engineers can create tickets with ChatOps integration. It also helps with monitoring. I think that, the support team has the ticket integration into Zendesk, and we also keep using it for reminders for events and CFPs, which helps me on a daily basis. Other than that, next to the aforementioned issue triage bot and review roulette, we as developer evangelists also have created our own bot, which helps us with specific campaigns on doing some release evangelism, which means sharing what's coming and what's cooking in our releases, and some more social media things. And everything is developed in the open. So if you need inspiration, I've linked it at the bottom. This also has the links to a repository where I can actually see how this bot is implemented. We also use review apps, making our lives easier in terms of, for example, we create a blog post or we create a website update, and we want to see the Git commit in that specific deployment. So it's possible to integrate that into GitLab and saying, please, I want to deploy it into my Kubernetes cluster, or maybe even a different virtual machine. And I can see the website live and don't need any local development environment just to verify the formatting of the blog post, the changes on the website, the changes on the web application, anything which comes to mind which needs a deployed environment to be reviewed and verified. Yeah, next to that, we also keep using feature flags. Feature flags allow us to roll out specific features behind the flag, and there are deployment strategies behind that, where you can say, I want to only test a small group of people, which could be the GitLab team members, for example, and customers are not affected. And it's also possible to hide like experimental features behind the feature flag and have them not affecting the self-hosted release, which comes on the 22nd. Even more, you can integrate security scanning and security testing in your CI/CD pipelines into GitLab to get an idea whether the code changes would introduce a security problem, would introduce maybe runtime problems, or the REST API is affected from any problematic queries. There is container and dependency scanning as well. We are actively using that. So anything which is affected from Ruby, Node.js, Golang, and JavaScript, which is our current stack, gets tested by that. And we also have a red team who does regularly pen testing and other things all around GitLab. Okay, the release generation is also a thing which might be interesting for you. We are dogfooding our own GitLab release feature in a way that we kind of present our own releases from that. And there's also the possibility to automate that within the GitLab CI/CD. Most recently, because we have 12 stages of different product managers and features, we're also automating or improving the release post generation. So everything you read on about gitlab.com on the blog is a huge collection of many features, and this also needs to be coordinated because you cannot really write a single blog post page from that. Okay, I think I have too many slides. I think this is one of the last ones. Quality engineering or Q&A is also a big part. Next to us testing GitLab on a daily basis, actually, we have our quality engineering team, which ensures that everything gets tested, that workflows get improved, end-to-end monitoring, improvements on unit tests, and further ideas. Everything out of that, basically new adventures. Since we document everything, you can kind of find everything I've talked about now on gitlab.com. Be it inspiration for your own workflows in terms of labels, issue templates, boards, and so on. Many different things. You can also maybe if you want to kind of review your documents for marketing strategies and have that in GitLab as well. So it's not just about code. And there's also things which sometimes happen naturally with like stepping on each other's toes. And one story I wanted to share was I did a CI monitoring webcast recently. We also had a discussion on CI efficiency in a different issue. And quality engineering added some more ideas to improving the CI pipelines and cost savings and other things. And then we created a documentation which benefits our users and customers. If you want to kind of learn more and share experiences, you can meet our team members, our heroes, and also the wider community members, and some resources as well. I would recommend to check out the All Remote Handbook if you haven't already. Join social media, follow our All Remote experts, evaluate your workflows, what you want to use with GitLab, the Jira integration, the automation with triage bots for issues, use the REST API, deployments, releases. Yep, and maybe adopt some culture or adopt the culture and values, update, create your own company handbook in a way that it involves everything we do, or even let inspire you by that. Yep, and that's about it. I think, yeah, I'm in time. So thanks for your attention.